The first presidential debate of the 2024 election is 10 days from now. CNN is hosting and has released a set of rules in advance. Both President Biden and former President Trump's campaigns have agreed to 2 commercial breaks, mics being muted when it's not their turn to speak, no props or pre-written notes. The podium position will be chosen by coin flip, and there will not be a live audience. Joining us to discuss is political science professor David Dulio from Oakland University. Thanks for joining me today, David.
Hi, Shana. Thanks for having me back.
So what do you think of these rules? The ones that really stand out to me are the muting of the mics and no live audience, it's something we've gotten used to seeing in recent years. What do you think CNN's goal is with this specific set of rules?
They're trying to control the environment, right? I mean, I think if we think back to 2020 and 2016, even before that, the debates that we've seen at the presidential level, as well as at other levels of politics, have often featured some spirited back and forth, let's say, when maybe it wasn't one candidate's turn to talk. So I think that, and in terms of the audience, right, there can sometimes be hooping and hollering that can be a distraction. So I think CNN is just looking for a very controlled environment.
So do you think that's going to work? I mean, they're not going to be able to interrupt each other, presumably, but it seems like a fair question to ask. Will it work? Will they be able to control the chaos?
Yeah, only time will tell. You know, I think that certainly former President Trump relishes the opportunity to spar with his opponents, and by the way, those include the moderators. So you know, I think that he'll do his darndest to try and be Donald Trump, right? And I think it'll be interesting to see how well the technology in terms of the muted mics works, and how tighter reins the moderators can have on the candidates.
Yeah, and speaking of the moderators, I believe it was one of President Biden's campaign's requirements. They said they wanted specifically news organizations rather than people from a non-political group or a nonpartisan group. What do you think about that choice? We'll have Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, I believe, moderating.
Yeah, I mean, those are pretty standard moderator selections, I would say. You know, we often see news anchors at the desk and in these sorts of things, and I think it's partly because number one, they're used to asking questions of these folks, and two, they're used to an adversarial system where you know, the press is often at odds with candidates and elected officials.
So without that live audience there, how do you think that'll impact both of these candidates from what we've seen from each of them over the years? When you're not getting that live real-time feedback, what kind of impact do you think it'll have on both Biden and Trump?
You know, look, I think Joe Biden is a seasoned candidate. He's certainly been around long enough and has gone through the motions on this sort of thing many times. So I don't think it'll impact him very much. Although, you know, he did seem to really enjoy and as you say, feed off of the environment that he had at the State of the Union in January or February, whenever it was this last year, and that seemed to buoy him quite a bit. So maybe a little bit of an impact there, but I think the larger one is for former President Trump. I think he really leans into the crowd and any sort of energy that is coming from them. It's certainly not going to be like one of his famous rallies, right, where they're loud and boisterous.
Right. So it's a long debate, only 2 commercial breaks, no notes or pre-written speeches allowed. So they're really going to have to be on their game and well prepared. Both of these candidates have had their fitness for office questioned for different reasons. What kind of opportunity or risk do you think this moment will present for each of them?
Yeah, I think, you know, well, let's start with some context, right? There are very few undecided voters right now. People know what they think about both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Those opinions are pretty well baked in. However, I think that this is one of a few high leverage moments that are left in this campaign cycle where if and let's just put it out there, right? The questions are, in this instance, are more about Joe Biden and his physical fitness and stamina and for some his mental acumen, right? And I think that's going to be tested over a 90-minute debate with only a couple short breaks and no prepared notes, which we've seen him have to rely on often. I think that they are busy prepping him, and we'll see how it shakes out. For Trump, I think it's, the risks are Joe Biden having 90 minutes to stand up at a podium and call him a convicted felon.
Sure. So, David, do you think that this format with this set of rules will kind of be an opportunity to get debates back on track? Because in recent years, they've become almost more entertainment than really something of substance. Do you think that this set of rules might be built upon in the future to kind of keep things on track?
Yeah, I sure hope so. I think that, debates are a really important aspect of campaigning, right? And it's mainly because it's one of the few opportunities that voters have to hear from candidates for office in an unproduced, unfiltered way, right? It's just the candidates talking, and as we've mentioned, right, with no notes, they don't have any prepared statements. I think that is, this unvarnished environment is really good for voters. And I hope that this is the first in a string of debates that we'll have for all sorts of offices that get us back to substance over sizzle.
Yeah, as you said, time will tell. Professor David Dulio from Oakland University, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.